In this video, I'll be breaking down the top 10 best Christian atheist debates that I think everybody should watch. I'm Cameron Bertuzzi. Welcome to Capturing Christianity. On this channel, we talk a lot about apologetics. So if that topic doesn't really interest you, then just don't subscribe to this channel. Just a couple caveats before we get started with this list. First, there's a whole lot of subjectivity in a list like this. So the good thing is that I'll be giving reasons why I'm including each debate in this list, so it's at least something. Second, there's a ton of debates that I couldn't fit in just like this list of 10. So if you'd like to see a list of honorable mentions, then just check the description. Ton of debates, awesome debates in there. Third, and my final caveat, is just that I'm going to include a difficulty rating for each debate. That way, as you're trying to decide which one to watch first, that may help you decide. Coming in at number 10 is the Matthew Flanagan versus Jason Thibodeau debate on the Euthyphro dilemma. And while this one is definitely not for beginners, I'm giving it a rating of intermediate. It's easily, hands down, one of my favorite Christian atheist debates. I kind of only know about it because it was actually hosted on this channel. But if you don't know what the Euthyphro dilemma is, basically it's a challenge to grounding morality in God. So it basically says this. So either God has reasons for commanding what he does, or he doesn't. But if he does have reasons, then it's those reasons that are the basis for morality. And then on the other hand, if God doesn't have reasons for commanding what he does, then it's just arbitrary. Like God could just command sort of anything, just becomes arbitrary. It's a very, very serious and interesting challenge to divine command theory. So there's a number of reasons why I love this debate. First of all, it's a really, really interesting objection. Second, it was actually really cool to listen to a debate that was on such a focused topic. Like most Christian atheist debates are just on the really broad question of like, does God exist? Or is Christianity true? So in this one, it's a very specific objection to like one argument. It's just a really, really cool way of doing it. Third, I thought that both debaters in this case were just really, really strong. So like when one of them would make a good point, the other one would come back and make two or three more good points. And it was a really, really good exchange of ideas. Like personally, I wasn't super jazzed about divine command theory going into this debate, but then I saw Matt, he defended it really, really well. And so there's all sorts of reasons I love this debate. It definitely needs to go in your playlist of like, yeah, you need to watch it. Coming in at number 9 is the debate that happened on Majesty of Reason between Rob Coons and Graham Oppy. They debated whether the necessary foundation or necessary part of reality is God. Kind of the only reason why this debate isn't higher up on the list is that, well, there's two reasons. So first reason is that it wasn't technically a debate. It was kind of like more of a dialogue. But then the second reason is that it does get kind of advanced or technical at points, so that I'm actually giving this one a difficulty rating of advanced. Personally, I loved this debate because it featured two of my favorite people, Graham Oppy and Rob Coons. Both of these guys are scary smart, in my view, but in this debate, they talked about a really, really important question that gets brought up a lot in these Christian atheist discussions, which is called the gap problem. The gap problem is basically the question of like, so even if we assume that the necessary part of reality, or there's some kind of necessary foundation, why think that necessary foundation is God? Why think it has all these divine attributes? That's the gap problem. And that's what this debate was all about. I think it's central to the divide between Christians and atheists. And so in this debate, you get to hear arguments from Rob Coons that attempt to bridge this gap from necessary foundation to God. So just an excellent, excellent dialogue. If you want to call it a debate, you can, but definitely put this one on your list as well. Moving right along, number 8 on my list is actually a devil's advocate debate that I hosted on my channel between Randall Rouser, he's a Christian who defended atheism, and then Joe Schmid, he's actually an agnostic, non-theist, but he defended theism in this debate, and it was just so, so good. Now, I'm actually giving this one a rating of intermediate. They do talk about some things that are a little bit higher up on the scale, so just keep that in mind. Devil's advocates debates like this are a little bit rare, and I wish that they actually happen more often, because if they're done correctly, they can just be super, super valuable. And I think that you're going to see that if you watch this debate. So like Joe's case for theism was bonkers. It was ridiculous. It was so good. If you didn't know that he was a non-theist, you'd be like, this is the most powerful case for theism I've ever heard in my life. So exchanges like this, I think they do two things. First, they highlight the importance of being charitable towards views that you disagree with. Second thing that I love about these kinds of debates is that they really encourage us to fight our own confirmation bias. So everybody deals with bias, but when you watch a debate like this, it really makes you start to think, am I giving the other side a fair hearing? Anyways, you definitely need to check out this debate. Super, super good. Highly recommend it. Coming in at number 7 on the list is a debate that occurred between Alvin Plantinga and Daniel Dennett on the topic of science and religion. And this debate was actually hosted, or it took place at an academic conference, so I think it definitely deserves a rating of advanced. Like number 9 on the list, this wasn't technically a debate, but it was nevertheless a really important clash between like two huge titans. On the atheist side is Daniel Dennett. He's actually one of the 4 horsemen of new atheism. He's an atheist philosopher, so pretty important guy. On the Christian side is Alvin Plantinga, and he's actually widely respected, even among his critics, as like one of the most important epistemologists and philosophers of religion to have ever lived. So again, pretty important guy. So this debate, if you want to think about it in these terms, is kind of like a clash between the best of Christian philosophy on the one hand and the best of new atheism on the other. It also kind of shows like two very, very different ways of doing philosophy. As philosopher Kevin Vallier, he was actually there when this debate took place. He puts it like this: in this debate, you're going to hear Plantingian wit versus Dennettian cuteness. Also, the following clip you're about to hear is absolutely legendary.
But I must say I was disappointed in his response to my evolutionary argument against naturalism. He basically simply announces that evolution has in fact produced us, and that in fact our beliefs do track the truth. But that's not an issue at all. I do not mean for a minute to argue that evolution has not produced us, nor for a minute that our beliefs do not track the truth. That isn't the question. The question is rather what the probability that our faculties should be reliable is, given evolution and naturalism. I gave an argument for supposing that probability is low. It seems to me Dan didn't mention the argument. Finally,
I mentioned premise 1.
Yeah, he mentioned premise 2.
He did all hangs on premise 1.
He did mention, but I gave an argument for premise 1, which Dan didn't, as far as I can see, he didn't mention. So he did mention premise 1, and I'm grateful for that.
Number 6 on our list is the debate that happened between Dr. William Lane Craig and Dr. Eric Wielenberg on God and morality. And this is actually the first formal debate on our list. What's really cool about this debate, and it's really unlike most debates, is that every section was actually written out months and I think even years before this debate ever took place. So their openings, their responses, their closings, everything was written out beforehand. Personally, I really like written debates like this because they actually reward substance instead of rewarding like whoever can think the quickest on their feet. The biggest downside to written debates is that when you turn substance like all the way up to 11, it can get a little bit difficult to follow at points. And it's also why I'm going to give it a rating of intermediate. Another really cool aspect of this debate is that Dr. Wielenberg, who's an atheist, actually agrees that morality is objective. So this dialogue focuses exclusively on whether God is required to ground objective morality. In my view, this was a really, really evenly matched debate that reached a depth that most debates never get to. If you have any interest in the moral argument at all, this is a must-watch. Gotta watch this one. Coming in at number 5 on our list is the debate between Dr. William Lane Craig and Dr. Peter Millikan that occurred during the Reasonable Faith Tour in 2011. This was the year I married my beautiful wife, and also the year that I started my apologetics journey myself. The rating for this one, I'm actually giving it a rating of beginner. Dr. Craig and Dr. Millikan debated the topic, does God exist? One of the things I really like about this debate is that Dr. Millikan, he's a really good philosopher, and he brought several objections to like each of Dr. Craig's arguments. This is another one of those debates that is just super high on the list in terms of quality and substance, but this one was also really accessible to a general audience. At number 4, we have the infamous debate that occurred between Dr. William Lane Craig and Dr. Shelley Keegan on whether God grounds morality. According to Dr. Craig, if you read his post-debate thoughts, this was actually never intended as a debate. It was more just like a friendly dialogue. That's why so says Dr. Craig, that he didn't push back on Dr. Keegan as much as he normally would if it were like a real formal debate. That said, what's most notable about this exchange is that pretty much everyone who watches this agrees that Dr. Kagan actually had the upper hand in this exchange. Why is that important? Well, because Dr. Craig wins like 99.9% of the debates and dialogues that he engages in. So when Dr. Craig doesn't have the upper hand, it's a pretty big deal. Oh, and I should also mention that I'm giving this one a rating of beginner. Personally, I'm hesitant to say that there was like any clear winner in this debate because it wasn't technically a debate. However, I've watched this debate a few times myself, and I've even watched it recently, and every time I've come away, even if it's just slight, I always come away thinking that Dr. Kagan had the upper hand in this exchange. Watch it for yourself, and let me know what you think in the comments. All right, we're getting to the top 3 debates. Can you guess what they are? Coming in at number 3 is the debate between Dr. William Lane Craig and Dr. Sean Carroll on God and cosmology. As you might guess, Dr. Craig argued that cosmological science supports theism. Dr. Sean Carroll argued that cosmological science does not support theism. This debate covered all sorts of interesting topics, from the beginning of the universe to fine-tuning to Boltzmann brains. The rating for this one is a little bit tricky. I'm going to give it an intermediate rating, although some parts are kind of advanced, so keep that in mind. One of the reasons why this debate is so unique is that I've already talked about how Dr. Craig wins most of his debates, but in this case, it's not all that clear like who won. It's kind of like down party lines. Theists think that Dr. Craig won. Atheists think that Dr. Carroll won. I actually remember watching this debate live, and as I was listening to it live, I was like, Dr. Carroll is just decimating Dr. Craig. I couldn't believe it. I thought he was just doing so good. But then a month or so later, the transcripts of the debate came out, and I actually read through them with a friend, and I came away with the opposite conclusion. I was thinking, Dr. Carroll didn't really give any good arguments in this debate. He just kind of, his rhetoric was actually better than Dr. Craig's, and I was not prepared for that. If you're interested, I've actually got a debate analysis between Dr. Craig and Dr. Carroll posted on this channel. I invited some cosmologists to comment, and it was really, really cool. I highly recommend checking out that video as well as the original debate. Coming in at number 2 is the debate between Bertrand Russell and Frederick Copleston that occurred all the way back in 1948. What's crazy about this exchange, by the way, they talked about the argument from contingency, or the cosmological argument, whatever you want to call it. It lasted only 17 minutes. That is it. But it is just filled to the brim with heavy, heavy philosophical content. For that reason, I'm actually giving this one a rating of advanced. What's super interesting about this debate is that the objections that Russell brought in 1948 are still brought today. Like, they're alive. These objections are alive and well in philosophy of religion. In fact, some Christian philosophers have expanded and used them themselves, like Richard Swinburne. Russell and Copleston are so brilliant, both of them. It actually, listening to this debate, them going back and forth, just blew my mind. The fact that they were able to give these responses in real time, crazy. Maybe the primary reason that it was so mind-blowing is because their accents, they're British, and so them talking back, it was just, that probably contributed. As with the previous debate I just talked about between Dr. Craig and Dr. Carroll, I've actually done, with another philosopher, a debate analysis of the exchange between Russell and Copleston. The person that joined me for this debate analysis was Dr. Josh Rasmussen, who is hands down probably the world's leading expert on the contingency argument. So we broke this exchange between Copleston and Russell down to bite-sized pieces. So the hope was that more people can really appreciate the magic. It's magic what happened between Russell and Copleston back in 1948. More people need to appreciate this debate. So go watch it. Watch our debate analysis. We've come now to the final debate, Christian-atheist debate on my list, and that is the debate between Dr. William Lane Craig and Christopher Hitchens. While this debate is not as philosophically hard-hitting as pretty much any of the other debates, which is why I'm also giving it a rating of beginner, like the exchange between Plantinga and Dennett, this features an exchange between one of the best of New Atheism, Christopher Hitchens, while he was still around, and Dr. William Lane Craig, who's the world's leading Christian apologist. So again, it's kind of best of Christian apologetics versus best of new atheism. When I first listened to Hitchens' opening speech, my heart sank. It sank and sank and sank. I just remember thinking that Dr. Craig is going to have a really difficult time responding to this. If you've never seen this debate, here's an example of what I mean.
Here's what you would have to believe if you thought that this was all designed. Dr. Craig gave a slight parody of what I think about this. It could be true, but you'd have to imagine, let's say the human species has been, Homo sapiens has been with us. Some people say as long as 250,000 years. Some say 200, some say 100,000. Francis Collins and Richard Dawkins oscillate about this. It's not a very big argument. I'll just take 100,000, if you like. You have to imagine that human beings are born. Well, actually, most of them, a good number of them aren't born. They die in childbirth or don't long outlive it. They're born into a terrifying world of the unknown. Everything is a mystery to them, everything from disease to volcanic eruptions. Everything is, their life expectancy for the first, many tens of thousands of years would be lucky to be in the 20s, probably dying agonizingly over their teeth, poorly evolved as the teeth are, and from other inheritances from being primates, such as the appendix that we don't need, such as the fact that our genitalia appear to have been designed by a committee, other shortcomings of the species, exaggerated by scarcity, by war, by famine, by competition, and so on. And for 98,000 years or so, heaven watches this with complete indifference. And then, we know where your children go to school, by the way. Heaven watches this with total indifference, and then, with 2,000 years to go on the clock, thinks, actually, it's time we intervened. We can't go on like this. Why don't we have someone tortured to death in Bronze Age Palestine? That should teach them. That should give them the chance of redemption. You're free to believe that, but I think the designer who thought of doing it that way was a very cruel, capricious, random, bungling, and incompetent one.
And now listen to the way that Dr. Craig addressed this in his first rebuttal.
Well, now, Mr. Hitchens says, but why did God wait so long before he sent Christ? Human beings have existed for thousands of years on this planet before Christ's coming. Well, what's really crucial here is not the time involved, rather it's the population of the world. The Population Reference Bureau estimates that the number of people who have ever lived on this planet is about 105 billion people. Only 2% of them were born prior to the advent of Christ. Eric Krapes of the Survey Research Center at the University of Michigan's Institute for Social Research says, God's timing couldn't have been more perfect. Christ showed up just before the exponential explosion in the world's population. The Bible says in the fullness of time, God sent forth his Son. And when Christ came, the nation of Israel had been prepared. The Roman peace dominated the Mediterranean world. It was an age of literacy and learning. The stage was set for the advent of God's Son into the world. And I think in God's providential plan for human history, we see the wisdom of God in orchestrating the development of human life and then in bringing Christ into the world in the fullness of time.
Dr. Craig came prepared with facts, and those facts worked in favor of the Christian perspective. Hearing this for the first time was just super impressive. I was not prepared for Dr. Craig to have prepared remarks from empirical research of population growth in response to Hitchens' arguments. This debate is so important and so valuable because, for me at least, and I'm sure for a lot of you out there watching this, this laid the foundation for me to see that Christianity is a viable intellectual option for a thinking person. That is it. Those are the top 10 best Christian atheist debates I think everybody should watch. If you think I've missed a debate, or if you think that my list was completely off, let me know in the comments. Hey, maybe you just write your own list of 10 yourself and then leave that in the comments too. As always, thank you guys for watching, and remember, Jesus rose bodily from the dead.